It is Nolan admitting guilt for starting the superhero movie trend. Right? Well, I did the Batman movies and now, well, we have superhero movies all the time and...
It's my fault.
It's my fault.
My bar is so low that I'm shocked that they made a movie that was positive about technology.
Was it?
Yeah, it just felt nice that we didn't get beat up on our heads about like technology is bad for you, it's all evil and everything's going to like come get you and end the world and that's it.
The movie does make you want to be part of something bigger than yourself.
This was a story worth telling. We need to inspire this generation, next generation of people to go solve hard problems, to go build things, to be of service, and that complexity can be powerful.
We are going to review the movie of the summer.
Yeah, I mean, when did we first see the trailer?
I think it was in IMAX before one of the big IMAX movies. I'm going to say it was before Top Gun Maverick, I think, because I think there was a big IMAX movie.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was like a year ago now?
Yes.
Something of that sort? Yeah. So, well, spoiler, we're going to talk about Oppenheimer.
Yes, we are. And there's a bunch of stuff we want to talk about.
The man, the movie, everything.
The hat. So we actually saw it a week after it came out. This is maybe this is probably the most, along with Barbie, the most anticipated movie of the summer. I wanted to see it, right? And so we waited for a week because we wanted to go see it in IMAX 70 millimeter, which is in it's only a few spots in the country where you can do that, and we're lucky enough in San Francisco to live close to one, but it took a week to get tickets.
Yes, it's fully booked out. I mean, I think this is week 3, week 4, and it's still mostly packed, which kind of warms my heart. Like people are actually coming back to the movies when the movie is right and when the movie is worth watching. I think people still show up, so that was kind of nice to see.
Why are we talking about this movie here today?
I think one, you and I, we love movies. We love going to the movies. It's always been a part of, our ritual, especially summertime blockbusters is something we've just been very excited about. But I think Oppenheimer is very special. One, it's Christopher Nolan's movie. One of the people we admire the most on just filmmaking and the craft of doing it right. But also, there are 2 different themes on Christopher Nolan and on, the Oppenheimer, the concept, the subject itself, and both like loosely tied towards technology and tech positivity in a way. And it really strongly resonates with us, our ethos, what we do, and the industry that we are in. We are squarely in technology. And so, we want to talk about parallels to what we are seeing today, the tech world and all of it. But the movie making, the craft of it is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And then there is Oppenheimer as a person and the bomb and the build up to the bomb, just building things, shipping things, getting things done, project managing, all of it.
Project managing, yes.
And it's, I hate to say it, but it's kind of exciting.
Yes,
the whole act of it is just so exciting. It's not even just like this whole bomb going off at the end, but the entire process is so great. And it'll be so hard for us to not have this episode because there's so much to go talk about.
It's been a while since we had a movie event like this where, there are obviously big summer blockbuster movies every year. We loved Top Gun Maverick last year. Yeah. But this was an event in that there was almost this meta narrative going in. Oh, is this going to be about AI? Is this going to be about science? Is this going to be about communism?
Yes.
Or so many other themes. So, but maybe let's take this in sequence, right? One of the most exciting parts of the movie was maybe the build-up and lead to it and actually going to the theater. So walk us through that experience because we wound up going there on a Saturday afternoon.
Right. Saturday afternoon, we usually try to do like late night shows. And this time, these were the only ones where we had decent tickets for. Got into an Uber, showed up there. This time around, there are no trailers.
Yes, which thankfully somebody on Twitter had told us about.
I know somebody, whoever warned us, thank you, because we would have shown up. We usually show up right on time, but we generally are like 20 minutes or so of trailers and then the movie starts. But you get in there, the logo goes up and it's just like...
It just bang, you're in.
Yeah, it's like, ooh, IMAX, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And then you're like in.
Was Nicole Kidman there?
No, I don't think
Nicole
so.
Kidman.
Yeah, no Nicole Kidman.
Wow,
she was not trapped in the theater anymore. And so... somebody let her free.
Side note, I just love how Nicole Kidman has become a meme
People applaud. People cheer for Nicole Kidman when she shows up on the AMC commercials. It's fantastic.
Gosh, yes.
But you show up, the IMAX stuff shows up, and then you're there in the movie, and it just kicks off.
Yeah.
You're sitting there going, okay, like we've been waiting for this movie all year. Expectations are super high. We tried very hard to not read any spoilers. Like we know what happens, but we just didn't want to like talk about the movie. So we tried to stay away from like reading anything about it and all of that. And so it totally delivered, I would say, at the end of this. Like it was a 3-hour plus movie. I don't know. What's like the build-up for you?
I think, so one is I tried really hard to stay away from the meta-narratives because I did not want to be told what to think about the movie before going in, which was really hard because we saw it a week after everyone had, I think, seen it. The second part of it is I think we did the right thing in waiting for it to be shown on 70mm IMAX. So this movie shows up in multiple formats, but 70mm IMAX is, very simply put, the biggest screen you can watch it on. And I think it's truly worth it. It is truly a cinematic experience in terms of the audio and the visual. And I'll just say, it was just energizing to go there on a Saturday afternoon. If you went on a Saturday afternoon because every seat was booked out. Let me ask, what is your overall take after 3 hours of the movie?
The movie, well, obviously we're going to spoil it. So if you haven't watched it, go watch it first. The movie almost ends on this like kind of negative note. I didn't quite agree with it. I didn't feel that. I actually felt like exhilarated. Part of it was like, wow, we built that. Like we built this whole thing, hugely complex problem. And like just building off the entire bomb was like, for me, was very intriguing as a project. Like, how do you test it? How do you get it off the ground? All of it. But then, there was this whole like thing about Einstein, communism. Did we set off this like chain reaction? Is this going to be? But now we know many years after, through Cold War, through everything else, that no, actually things worked out okay, in the sense of like it didn't really set off like this big nuclear chain reaction. It ends in this like almost, oh my God, what have we done kind of mode. I didn't quite feel that way, and maybe I was one of the few people there. I actually felt like this was a story worth telling. We need to inspire this generation, next generation of people to go solve hard problems, to go build things, to be of service, and that complexity can be powerful. And then the other part about it, and I think you've read a lot of books on Oppenheimer. What was the book called? The American Prometheus. They have that line in the movie, which I thought was like a good wink, wink, nudge, nudge. For me, like getting exposed to this person who's like clearly brilliant, has these different personas, different facets, but can come together and do this and can manage a team to get this delivered, I thought was like a great story to be told.
Yeah. I think my prevailing emotion, I think coming out of it, which was in some ways, the movie does make you want to be part of something bigger than yourself. And I think there's a theme through the movie of being called to service, being around amazing people, being in a project which they have questions and qualms about, but they know will define their lives, and just being a part of history. When you come out, I think you definitely feel that. Second is, this is Nolan at the peak of his powers. You see all the historical Nolan, signature traits, but taken to the max. For example, the movie just feels relentless. So it's actually a 3-hour movie, but I think it could have easily been a 2-hour movie. It feels like a 2-hour movie rather, just because it just moves in this relentless fashion. And there are so many times where Nolan does such a great job of telling a story cinematically. For example, the interleaving of the stuff with Robert Downey Jr. post-Trinity test, which is in black and white, with what happens pre-test and a story being told back and forth. The other Nolan signature, which is an event which gets interpreted, which keeps coming back. They keep coming back to. In this case, him chatting with Einstein near the pond. But every time you see it, you get a slightly different interpretation.
Right.
And I think he just pulled out all the tricks of the trade, which you've seen him build up, to make something which could easily been boring, but seem just cinematic spectacle. And one thing I really appreciate about this movie is, I suspect a lot of people in tech expected it to be preachy, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually tell you, except maybe at the little end, what to think. It's actually very ambiguous and in a way maybe true to fiction about what Oppenheimer himself thinks. And it really leaves things open to interpretation, which I really appreciated. But I think from just a cinematic spectacle, it was fantastic. And we have to start talking about the performances. So Cillian Murphy was amazing. What stood for you about him?
I mean, when you look at what Oppenheimer really looks like, they look very eerily alike. Like, it's the first thing that catches you because like the photographs of Oppenheimer and Cillian Murphy, they are like very, very similar. So that I thought was like interesting because, he's gone through this big transformation, has worked really hard for this. The intensity of the role of the character, I think was really great. Just the costume design. Like, I think in real life too, Oppenheimer like knew the role that he was playing, I guess, and dressed the part. Like the hat really stands out. And so like I thought they paid a really good, there was great attention to detail on the costumes of the people. It just feels like he just showed up and came to play. Like Cillian Murphy just was like really powerful.
He talked about how when he was preparing for the role, he figured out that Oppenheimer was such a, I think the phrase used was self-mythologizing character. He really cared about his outfit. And this actually comes up in a few scenes in the movie. For example, one of the best scenes is when they show up at Los Alamos. Oppenheimer is wearing a military uniform. And he's told, like, why are you doing that? You're not one of them. You're one of us. You have to act like a scientist. And then he breaks out the trademark hat and, the rest of his outfit. So Oppenheimer in reality was very much a self-mythologizing figure. Always had a sense of his place in history, wanted it, created it, and then eventually got it. And I think they really portray that. For me, I think, one is obviously Nolan attracts so many amazing people who just show up for one scene. Gary Oldman like shows up for one scene in this room and he kills it. But I think the two people who really make the movie work are, and I'm stealing this from another review or conversation I had with somebody else, where because Matt Damon is so good as General Groves, and then Robert Downey Jr. and General Groves is kind of the good guy, right? He plays the good guy. He plays the voice of the stuff, but he's really kind of the good guy. He also becomes comic relief. And then on the other hand, you have Robert Downey Jr. Who essentially plays the villain. So in some ways, both of them kind of take the pressure off of Cillian Murphy to be a traditional protagonist or antagonist. And so you can stay in the middle, you can stay ambiguous because you cannot have the other moral poles here. But I think among both of them, we actually really loved Matt Damon's performance, and especially the scene where the
scene where they meet. I think when General Groves and Cillian Murphy, like when Oppenheimer meet in his lab, General Groves is tasked with the Manhattan Project and finding a person to go lead that, right? And so he's going through his list of names, and he comes to Oppenheimer and has this like first scene where he's like, I don't think you're the right person for this role. And he like just rattles off a bunch of attributes that are just super negative.
Dilettantish, might have communist sympathies. I think, you're
unstable. There's like a bunch of stuff in there. And then Cillian Murphy like pauses and says, and you didn't mention brilliant. And he's like, well, that's kind of part of what you do. And that's a circle that you are in. So that's taken for granted. So no, like I'm not going to call you that. But everything else is really concerning. And so they have this like back and forth. I mean, obviously, General Groves ends up picking Oppenheimer and they start like working together on this thing. But it was it was an incredible scene because you can see the chemistry between the two of them. They got along. It would really work. They kind of like play off of each other. There is intensity there. They're both speaking truth, but they're also trying to see past that in the virtues of this other person. And the stakes are really high. There is a war going on. This is a big project. There is a huge budget attached to it. There are thousands and thousands of hundreds of thousands of lives at stake, and they have to pick a guy to go lead it. So there's so much gravity towards this decision here. So you can see the whole thing play out through this one scene. This is a pivotal scene, and I think it comes in like a full hour into the movie or something. And I remember leaning into Sriram and being like, after like 60 minutes, we get to see this like this go at it scene.
No more throat clearing.
Yeah, no more throat clearing. It just like lights up the screen, and Matt Damon just comes in like guns blazing and just like
I think that is very important. And I think the Matt Damon Cillian Murphy dynamic is very important because one is Matt Damon's job is to make the audience like Oppenheimer in a way. So he actually does this thing where he He explains to the audience why they should like Oppenheimer, explains all of it. And it's one of the few places, I think, where you see Oppenheimer smile when he chats with him. I think the other flip version of that scene is when they are in that little cabin waiting for the test, where which I think shows in the trailer, where, you know, Matt Damon's like, wait, you're telling me there's a chance, you know, the atmosphere gets lit up and we all die?
Yeah.
And you know, what do you get from theory? What do you expect from theory alone? And he's like, 0 would be nice. So I think Matt Damon plays multiple roles. He's the moral center. He's a good guy. He is...
But also the voice of the audience.
He's the voice of the audience. And he also brings comic levity because he's... So I thought that was a fantastic role. And I also really loved Robert Downey Jr. in this role because it's the first time we haven't seen him play Iron Man. And what I mean by that is, I think for 15 years, every Robert Downey Jr. role we have seen, whether it was an Iron Man or Sherlock Holmes, was always a variation of what I kind of think the real Robert Downey Jr. is like. And this was the first time you kind of saw him go outside of that to something else. I think the other person who was huge for the movie is Emily Blunt.
Emily Blunt was fantastic.
Emily Blunt was fantastic. And I think...
I think with Emily Blunt, what I really liked was they introduced her in this very traditional context of this is a wife, she has kids, all of that. But then in that the closed door hearing, you almost have her not be visible at all.
Yeah.
In the first bunch of scenes, she's almost like blurred out in the background.
Because US audience are like, this is Emily Blunt.
Yeah, everyone's like, that's Emily Blunt, right? Like, we know who that is. Any other movie director would have been like, pans to Emily Blunt, pans to, you know, Cillian Murphy, and or whoever's like on the witness stand kind of thing. But, you know, Nolan just like decides to ignore her for the most part until the point where she comes in, sits down and does her thing and she like kills it, right? Like, and like right at the very end, there's a scene where she like refuses to shake hands, which is one of my favorite scenes. Really strong performance end to end, and it's not an easy role to play. Like, she's supposed to be, and maybe I'm in the minority here, there are like some of these roles in these movies where and this typically happens to like the wife roles or the female roles, where it's like you're supposed to be chaotic, neurotic, crazy, but you're supposed to have like gravitas, you're supposed to like be the powerful lady and hold everything together, but hey, you're crazy too. And it's like, which one is it? Like, make up your mind. And it's very, very hard to play it. And clearly here she has issues. They kind of hint at like alcoholism. They kind of hint
more than
like
hint at it, actually, I think.
And they're like, well, is she a good mom? Is she not? Like, they kind of like, she's like irritated by her kids crying and all of that. They like at some point hand over a kid to, and it's like, we're just selfish people, and he just hands off the kid, and you're like, whoa, okay. So there's like a lot of bad things, bad attributes about like the wife character, but somehow she like has to play that role, but also be like, no, actually, you know, she kind of talks about Robert Downey Jr. It's like, do you not see this, you people? Like, it's him who's the one who's been doing this. But also at the very end, you know, Cillian like waits for her and she shows up and he's like, there are a lot of things that I might not agree with her, but she will always show up for me. And she like shows up and is a total loyalist, stands by him, sits next to him, gives a testimony, refuses to shake hands. Like, she's always like been this big fan of Oppenheimer,
right?
And is always loyal to him, which I thought was a great complex portrayal of her.
I guess one interesting theme to explore is the idea of project management.
Yeah.
Right. Leading up all the way to the test. So what was your takeaway from just seeing that entire sequence in Los Alamos, starting from when they picked the site all the way to the Trinity test?
I mean, they tried to do justice to the whole project and the setup and stuff, but I almost feel like Nolan had like 100 more hours of tape and they had to like edit through a lot of that. And so you don't, like, if you've read, you know, the Wikipedia entry or any of the books on this, like there are like whole books on just the project and the test and the setup and how they picked this town, how they created the test site, who they hired. Everything was like, it's a huge endeavor, right? And then none of it is straightforward. It's a lot of complexities, lots of like really insane decisions. I felt like it was very good. To me, the things that stood out was, surprisingly, Oppenheimer, being the scientist that he was actually also a really great project manager.
Yeah.
And that really came through in the movie, which I thought was like kind of neat, because in our world, it's like the software architect who just wants to like lock themselves in a room and write code all day. And the stereotype is that they're not good people managers and they don't like to manage projects. And could have been so easy to kind of frame Oppenheimer that way. That is like, he's a crazy, reclusive, genius, physicist, scientist person who's like working on this thing, like laboratory, does stuff. And, they have a montage sequence and ta-da, there's a test. But no, he actually is a really good project manager. Even like setting out the whole test area in Los Alamos. Oh, we should like build a town here. We should like bring their wives. We should bring the kids. We should set up schools. We should, like him and the Matt Damon character, General Groves, like are working together on how do you build this ecosystem around building the test site, right? Like it's not just the testing alone. It's like testing is almost like a side effect of getting all the people and the ingredients in place. And they actually showed all of that in happening. So that I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time of when he was hired, right, and Matt Damon was like, he didn't have a Nobel Prize. I don't think he was even regarded as one of the best scientists of his time.
Right.
And I don't think he ever, he was kind of like individually, at sort of like, there are others who are considered better than him, to put it mildly. But you're right, like, he turns out that he was actually an amazing project manager. And I think the movie, that part is actually very relevant for those of you who are kind of watching and you're trying to figure out like lessons to apply. Which is, how do you recruit some of the best people? And I think part of it is like, he gives them a mission, which is, hey, you're going to save America and maybe the world, because the Nazis having the bomb would be really bad. And then he sets up an environment where they can just do that work unencumbered. He's very clear about what the best people in the world need to do that work. Like, they need access to all these resources. They need access to their families. They need to hang out with each other. I also really like the dynamic they showed in the meetings, right? Like, there'll be these few meetings they show where he'll drop the candy in the bowl to kind of show how much, refined plutonium I think they had. He's a first among equals, where he's never making the decision. They all respect each other, but he's, it's a collaborative environment, but it's clear who's in charge. And a lot of this maps to, if you read, American Prometheus or the Rhodes book, how things really went out.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lesson in there about giving people a sense of huge purpose, of course, a purpose which probably most founders can't or shouldn't replicate. Second, giving them an environment where they can do their best work, harnessing the best out of them. And also, I think most importantly, like having a deadline and having to ship, right? One of the biggest things there's like, it's not research. The movie keeps coming back to, it's not theory. You actually have to go build this thing. You actually have to go do it. And so you actually have to go ship. So there's this great book called Organizing Genius, which goes into the Manhattan Project. It goes into Pixar. And you see teams come up all the time. Mission, small group, brilliant people who may not always agree, giving them a fantastic environment where they can work, and also being forced to ship, which I think is like very, very common scenes. But which other point, what do you think of the bomb, the moment, the 3D explosion? Do you think Christopher Nolan was like, all right, we're going to blow up this nuclear weapon?
I mean, they said there was no CGI.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that meant no like CGI cleanup. What does that really mean?
Somebody in the Pentagon was like, we have a very unusual request from Christopher Nolan, right? Like,
not to get into like the virtues of, should you have built a bomb, World War II, implications, all of that. To me, what was fascinating was the fact that this was a hugely complex technological problem. It was not clear at that time on who was winning. There was this whole fog of war. Was it the Russians? Was it the Nazis? Who's building what? And all you get was like, if they have it, then we are dead. And the world was going to end. And you should build it first so that the bad guys don't have it and get to like, leverage it and basically destroy everything. And so in that context and setting all of that was kind of interesting and useful, because you see, it's never easy to like do a movie that's like ultimately about a bomb and killing people.
Yeah.
But so in that context and framing, you're like, okay, but this is a hugely complex problem. And so when that final scene, when the bomb goes off, you can kind of feel it. And maybe it was
we actually uploaded in the theater. I think we actually uploaded, a bunch of people applauded in the theater. It felt like an engineering accomplishment.
Yes, exactly. It's a bit odd to clap for it.
Yeah,
but
I will ask you, can we clap for this? Like, are we supposed to?
But to me, it felt like this is a software project that shipped.
Yeah, let's ignore the fact it's going to kill hundreds of thousands of people. You're going to clap for it. I do think like it's interesting because on that moment it was kind of present as a triumph. I thought it was interesting in the end of the movie. They show the scene with Einstein, and he basically tells Einstein like, "I might have already killed the world," setting off the chain reaction. The movie, that's actually really the only spot the movie takes a stance on how they want.
Yeah, I felt really
What about the movie did not work?
That did not work. The ending of the movie, I almost feel like, look, maybe this is just my stance. It is probably my stance. I'm sure a lot of people felt like, oh yeah, this is bad for humanity. But you have to put it in context of where they were at that point. And they truly, truly thought if the bad guys, quote unquote bad guys, got it, the world would end. This is it. This is a race. This is a fight for survival. Think of it as like any other construct where it's you versus somebody else. Whoever gets it done first wins. And then like the movie does a great job of like not picking sides and not taking a stance. I also really appreciated like the whole communism part. They were very fair about it. They made it very factual. They didn't make it like he was a communist, has associations, or they weren't like communist, but okay, whatever kind of thing. They actually showed the complexity of the whole thing. Clearly brilliant, clearly the person in hindsight to have led this project, but clearly also had a trouble, like a different background, which was problematic. But that ending scene was like, to your point, was the one where they actually ended up taking a stance, being like, ooh, maybe the world has already ended, or I caused the world to already end kind of thing. And you're like, don't do that. You just capitulated. It just felt...
Yeah, I know. It did. My favorite interpretation by far about that ending was, they said, it is Nolan admitting guilt for starting the superhero movie trend. Right? Which is like, he's like, well, I did the Batman movies and now, well, we have superhero movies all the time and...
It's my fault.
It's my fault, right? Yeah. It's like, which is my favorite interpretation of the ending.
Well, yeah. I mean, I just think... We are especially at this time where we should encourage generations to go build things. And to me, that ending, I understand where Nolan came from on taking that stance, but that's the part I did not agree.
I think the flaw with the ending is that, well, I think the challenge of the ending is that it's going to perhaps encourage a lot of people to think that their work is important enough that it could end the world when it is not, as opposed to Oppenheimer, where his work maybe could have.
In what way? What's the reference?
I don't know, like you're just fixing some, small-time bug in some small-time piece of software, and you're like, well, I could not destroy the world, and well, maybe you won't. But I do think it kind of plays in the self-mythology aspect of it a lot. I think a few things in the movie which didn't work. There were kind of these little throwaway scenes. For example, somebody said, John F. Kennedy is mentioned like an Avengers character, right? Like, it's like, oh, well, that's another comic book canon. This is that it was Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, and you're like, okay.
So,
right?
I know that guy.
Yeah. It's like a comic book reference that didn't work. I think the other challenge was they struggled at times to show Nolan's inner dialogue. I think especially because it's unclear what his stance on things. So, and the way they did it was to show, I think that few times the scene was used, which was to show the nuclear explosion, but happening inside the little prosecution room where the hearings happened. Or
you didn't like that?
No, because I just thought it was like, I think it was a way of trying to say, oh, he's feeling regret or guilt. And I just felt that...
Did you like the other scene where they were like applauding, clapping?
I think that was well done because I think...
Like the face is peeling off.
I think it was well done because I think that was so well done technically. The audio
was muted, but you could still...
But also there was this... I think the movie uses multiple times where, just like in Dunkirk, there is a rising tension in the score. And in that case, it was all the feet stomping, and then it leads to something, and then there is the release.
Yeah, they call it the wall of sound, right?
And it happens to the bomb too, because when the test goes up, they just goes silent. So I think that the other thing was like there are so many characters in there. Only later do you figure out like, oh, that's Richard Feynman because he's playing the Bogart drum. So there are all these like ridiculously famous, great minds in the 20th century.
Yeah, I just think he had like way too much tape.
Yeah.
This would have been like a 16-hour movie if you had just let it be.
If I was in the job business of trying to hire theoretical physicists into academia, this is a great movie, right? Basically, what it is telling you that, if you study physics, right, like you're going to hang around attractive people, you're going to do amazing work, right? Like, you're going to, it's like you're basically James Bond, as a scientist.
But in real life, he did learn Sanskrit to be able to read the Bhagavad Gita. He was a big fan of it. In the movie, the lines that they quote is actually like,
It's actually because I don't think that those lines actually in the Gita actually wind up meaning what
they convey it to mean in the movie.
Yeah.
In the Gita, well, we're going to go into a bit of a detour here. This is basically Krishna's line where he talks about time and him becoming time being the death of everything or causing the. Over time, everything dies. Like, that's kind of the
Aarthi and Sriram Show, where we explained Hindu scripture in 30 seconds.
It was a bit tacky to have used it. Like, it felt unnecessary almost. But, like you say, this is a great way to recruit engineers.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, like, well, this is what your life as a theoretical physicist looks like. Not, classroom or board. You're going to get out, hang out with Florence Pugh and Emily Blunt and all these people, and maybe, save the world. Okay.
Yes.
Implications for AI.
Before going into the movie theater, before watching the movie, I kind of thought they were going to like do this. The parallels to this are like the world of AI today kind of thing. And, we've done episodes on this, on how AI is going to save the world. I think if you haven't watched it, there is a great Mark and Andreessen episode where we do a whole thing on this. I kind of thought they were going to have like parallels to this, but they didn't, which I thought was like, it was refreshing. Look, honestly, my bar is so low that I'm shocked that they made a movie that was positive about technology.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Christopher Nolan is a techno-optimist. I think many of his movies are about tech and building tech, and maybe I just see it that way, but it just felt nice that we didn't get beat up on our heads about like, technology is bad for you, it's all evil, and everything's going to like come get you and end the world, and that's it. And look at the comparison with AI, and look at the comparison with this, like the next new thing. And they didn't do all of that, and they didn't try to be too smart about it. And I really like that restraint. They just stated the facts for the most part and just made it almost like a late documentary almost, and just captured it that way, which I thought was like interesting.
Yeah, I know. I was watching a lot of the Nolan interviews, and he doesn't really mention AI at all. And of course, a lot of these movies are meant, it's not about the filmmaker, it's what you take away from it. But I don't think it's really meant to be about it. I think it's actually really just meant to be more nuclear weapons. Yeah. Okay. Final takeaways and thoughts?
I mean, you should go watch it. Everybody, like, no matter what people tell you, go watch it. There are lots of lessons here, I think, for people, for founders, for people building companies, for big complex projects, obviously about like patriotism, what it means for your country, to be of service to your country. And look, obviously this is all about America and making this like huge project happen in the US kind of thing. It's obviously on that context, but I think it applies to what it means for you to be of service to your country. And I think it's something that in tech, we don't really get to see a lot of on a day-to-day basis. And it's only now, like at least in the US and stuff, it's becoming a thing, right? And I think we need a lot of that. The power of applying technology in deeply interesting ways to serve the nation.
Good to go see that in all forms, not just story, but visuals and audio. And second about just like the idea of engineering things. So much of the movie is just about people trying to build things, overcome hard problems in a team, and that's where like great work happens. And you can't. I know that a lot of people walk with different emotions, but I do think it makes you want to work around great people. At least that's what I did. But highly, highly recommended that you go watch it.
This might also be our episode where we finally get cancelled. So.
Oh, well, that hasn't happened. Well, we should happen multiple episodes ago, so we're long overdue.
Yeah, long overdue anyway.
On that note, let us know what you think, especially about Oppenheimer. Like, subscribe, drop comments. You know the deal. Until next time.